Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
You ready?
Showtime.
On May 3rd, summer starts with The Fall Guy.
Let's do it later.
Let's drink a spicy margarita.
Make some bad decisions.
Yes!
Audiences are falling in love with the most entertaining film of the year.
Fall Guy.
Fall Guy?
Fall guy.
That's what the poster said.
See Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt in the movie critics say exists to make you happy.
Trying to make it out?
Nope.
Because I don't either. It's not what I'm into right now.
What are you into?
Talking.
Yeah.
The Fall Guy. Only in theaters May 3rd. Rated PG-13.
Hello, Blazer fans. Welcome to the Great British Royal Wedding edition of the Blazers Edge podcast, part of the almighty Baller Radio Network. I am Tara, the Grand Duchess of Blazers Edge, and I am joined by Bonnie Prince Danny.
Oh, God, help me.
How was the royal wedding for you, Dan?
Oh, yeah.
Did you take it in? And did you take it in all its glory?
Yeah, by take it in, you mean completely tried to run away from every bit of it, but was smattered with it in every form of social media and news, print media.
Why did you want to watch the royal wedding, Dan? Do you hate love?
Yes. All things good must die. No, I don't know. I just didn't care. I literally just didn't care.
I didn't care either until I turned it on and I was like, it's a really nice escape. It's like one of those things that it was like, you know what? Some people just know how to throw a really nice, classy wedding. And it was just a really nice kind of
Who knew a
time
royal
out.
family would throw a classy wedding?
Well, we haven't had one for a few years, and America isn't always the classiest place all the time, especially if, like us, we spend a lot of time on Twitter. Sometimes Twitter can get a little not classy.
Twitter is the classiest place we have. I can tell you everything you need to know.
I thought it was wonderful, and I'm sad for you that you missed out on it because there were some magical moments.
No, I'm good. The British accent was a nice touch, though.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just trying to class the place up here a little bit, Dan. Bonnie, Prince Danny. But it did get me thinking of all the Blazers. Who do you think would have the most opulent wedding?
Ooh, you got to have the money to do it. It's got to be Dame or CJ. And honestly, I think Dame keeps things a little bit more low-key for a lot of things. But it seems like when he wants to make a splash, like a suit with no undershirt.
Like a suit?
Like he goes crazy on stuff. So yeah. I think Dame has that in him. I think CJ would try to keep it pretty stylish and up to date, and I think Dame may try something a little bit wild, depending on, of course, what his fiance decided to say about that.
Well, you're wrong, because obviously it would be Evan Turner, because can you imagine what kind of a wedding he might throw?
He'd have a Supreme tux on, and it'd be videotaped by drones.
Well, he already has a Bentley. So, since you didn't watch the royal wedding, a very important part of big opulent weddings is driving up in big fancy cars. So he already has the amazing car.
I thought you needed a carriage.
Well, it's the 21st century, Dan. Come on, get with it.
Isn't that the point of opulence, is to have something that nobody else has?
I don't have any Bentleys.
You don't have a carriage either.
No. But so I think Evan Turner would put on a spectacular wedding. Even if he was just putting one on for a friend, I think he would outdo himself. I bet he's an amazing event planner, because I think you're right. I think there would be drones. There would be all kinds of little twists and turns that only could appear in the mind of Evan Turner.
This is the man that does his best thinking on the toilet, so I can believe it.
Yes. He'd be standing up there in his silk boxing robe and his fuzzy slippers. All right, well, let's get to the Blazer news. We'll have more Blazer speculation later, not on wedding dates, but on rumors that are starting to pop up. This week, the NBA Combine was in Chicago, and the Blazers did not send a big contingent. They only have the 24th pick as of this moment anyway, but they were represented. They sent their team sports psychologist, Dana Sinclair, went and did some interviews with players. Is that an odd thing that they didn't send basketball people? I mean, let me say she's a basketball person, but she's a different type of basketball person.
Yeah, Portland's been doing this now for a few years. This is just kind of what they do. I think they rely on their research and their scouts and all of their management personnel as far as the basketball stuff, like the on the court stuff. And they're really only trying to get a look at one particular thing through the lens that they've chosen, and that's the team psychologist that they've employed now for a while. To be honest, it's for the most part worked for them as far as getting guys personality-wise that fit together. We haven't had save I hate to even mention his name again. Save like a guy like Felton, the Blazers really haven't had core chemistry issues in quite a while. So I think they're kind of following that trend of going after the same or the right kind of guys' mental makeup as far as team composure.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes along with last week. I think last week I asked you, what do people really get out of the Combine? I mean, measurements could be taken anywhere, and I think the measurement thing is a little weird and creepy anyway. Sometimes I guess you get to see them play 5-on-5, which I guess, especially guys who are like maybe in a mid-major or in a smaller school that wasn't playing the super high level competition. It's like the first time to see them. But it sounds like you're saying that, a lot of the work goes on, during the year that the scouts are already doing anyway. And so it's just their first time to talk one-on-one with these young men, face to face. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the wingspan and how big their hands are? And it all matters.
It all matters.
But does it really matter that they have to all stand in line and get measured? Can't you just look at Mo Bamba and go, that dude's arms are crazy long? I mean,
it's a game the NFL's the same way. It's a game of inches. The ability to alter a shot, to get in a passing lane, to catch a pass. There have been guys in throughout league history who had tiny hands and had trouble catching passes in traffic. Guys that don't have long enough wingspan, and a lot of these guys you want to get the actual.
Can't you tell by watching them play whether or not their wingspan and their speed is fast enough?
Yeah, but you want to get all that stuff on record, because when you're deciding between two guys, if things are close enough, teams have certain ways that they'll go with things, whether it's mental makeup or physical makeup. And I think that's
all
a huge
else
part
being
of it.
equal. If one guy's wingspan is 7'4", someone else is 7'2".
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it. Somebody's a little bit longer, somebody's a little bit faster. I mean, those are the things that are going to break it apart. I mean, when you're talking about the guys on this level, the smallest advantages are the ones that matter. Because everybody's just physically at a level that's, in the 0.1%. These guys are just absolute freaks.
Okay, but so they spend so much time at the Combine measuring everybody. And remember, oh my God, Noah Vonleh's hands are incredibly huge. Pat Connaughton has the second highest vertical leap ever recorded. Okay, so where are these guys now? I mean, just because
it doesn't always matter. We've talked about it before. Noah Vonleh is a prototype. If you're going to build a guy in a lab, he comes out looking like Noah Vonleh. 6'10", big lower body, great wingspan, already had a man build coming into the league, had the weight necessary to play down low. I mean, he checks all the boxes, but the basketball stuff and the mental aspect of it, those are all things that matter.
I think it's disingenuous to spend so much time emphasizing measurements at the Combine when they can't get them right. Everybody knows that Kevin Durant is not 6'10", and nobody will change his measurements on
That's the official ones submitted.
NBA.com.
Yeah, I know. Those are the official ones that are submitted, but the Combine ones are what are actually measured, which is different.
I'm just not into the whole measurement thing. But in terms of the psychology test, do you think that she like gives them basically like a Myers-Briggs type thing? I mean, are you familiar with that, where you're given a personality type, and it's not like to judge whether or not you're a good personality type, but just to see how your personality type fits in with those around you, and if your personality type fits with, you know, the strengths of what you're going to be asked to do?
I'm certain that's probably part of what they do. But I think they probably go a little bit deeper than that. I think they only get, 15 to 20 minutes with them a piece, so they don't get a ton of time. So it's probably pretty focused. From what I've heard coming out from players that have met with the Blazers, it's usually they won't elaborate exactly on what questions were asked, but they say that at least from what I've seen, that the questions themselves are very specific.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they're honing in on certain things clearly.
Like basketball specific, or
it's been vague in general, so I don't know. But I would assume that since there are no true basketball personnel there, I would assume this is all about mental makeup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I wish I was a fly. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in one of those conversations.
But we did get one huge thing out of the combine. Mo Bamba has the longest wingspan on record so far.
Yeah,
7'10".
That's so that's
absurd.
longer than a car, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how long is a car?
I mean, most cars probably your average coupe, you're talking about 8 feet.
Wow. Yeah, that is very, very long.
I mean, it's nuts.
We shall see how that translates.
And by I mean like actual space. I'm talking, wheel to wheel. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, so Dana Sinclair was not the only person there with Blazer connections. Obviously,
no, she
NBC
wasn't.
Sports Northwest sent Jason Quick there. He shared a whole bunch of information about players that the Blazers either met with or are planning on working out in the coming weeks. Were there any players that were mentioned who stood out to you, or people that we should really listen for their names for potential, Blazer reasons?
The thing about this is they're looking at guards. I mean, it's point guard, shooting guard, point guard, shooting guard, point guard, shooting guard, point guard, shooting guard, shooting guard, small forward. The biggest hole on this.
They're all
6'5". Close. I honestly, I figured they would have gone for forwards, but depending on where they're picking, I mean, there's a lot. There isn't a ton of wings outside of the top crop, so probably this is why they're looking at this as best player available.
Right.
But
okay, yeah. Actually, let me ask you a question on that. So I know. There's one school of thought, especially at the very top of the draft, is take best player available. Now, when you get down in the 20s, are you still looking for the best player available? Are you looking for best fit? Or, again, does it still just matter whatever the philosophy of your team is?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that go on. If you're the Warriors, you're looking for fit, I think. You don't care about best player available. You're just looking for somebody to fit in right now, right away, unless you're projecting towards the future. Other teams are looking at best player available.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can start messing around with that depending on where your team is at.
Mm-hmm. You mean where they just finished in the season and
exactly.
what their
goal is going forward.
Looks like going forward?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, anyway, back to any names that we should keep our ears tuned to.
The guy that I like, as far as who's been named so far, is Bruce Brown out of Miami.
Okay.
Brown's just tough. He is a tough player, and I think that Portland could use a guy like him in the locker room. But the weird thing is I kind of see Wade Baldwin as possibly filling that kind of role. So part of me thinks they need to go more towards shooting, especially if they're considering losing Shabazz, and that's what it looks like, at least from what I've seen. You've got DiVincenzo, Jerome Robinson, Kyrie Thomas. You've got guys of these combo guards that I'm assuming are guys that they're looking at to replace Shabazz Napier.
One name that stood out to me was Gary Trent Jr. because I remember the Gary Trent days. He was here. Do you remember those days? Were you around, or were you off?
Yeah, no, 95, 98 is definitely like prime high school watching years for me, and I got to see Gary Trent Sr., but it's actually kind of cool for me because, you know, I got to go and really check out Hoop Summit a few years ago and see these guys up close and personal, and Gary Trent Jr. is one of the guys I got to spend some time with. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, and personally, I really like Trent. Watching him in workouts, his personality, his mindset, and like if you're talking about like guys that Portland's looking for, and I can't believe I'm saying this about a Duke guy, but he's also the son of a Blazer, so it kind of balances out. But he was a guy. There was two guys that came out of that camp that I really liked the makeup of, and that was Gary Trent Jr. and Jared Vanderbilt. I love their game, their mindset, their mentality, how they went about, you know, their day-to-day stuff. There was just something about them that they were above everybody else on the, at least as far as it appeared, on a mental level, like understanding the game, where they need to be, how to help other guys and communicate, and just kind of be an effective leader. And I saw that.
And that was
in
at the
both
Hoop Summit,
guys.
right?
Yeah, that was 2 years ago at the Hoop Summit. And those were two guys that really stood out. And not to say that Gary Trent Jr. also isn't, like, textbook-wise, one of the best-looking jumpers I've ever seen. It's a thing of beauty. So he's one of those guys where
I've been fooled by those before.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, it's so pretty you think it's going to go in every time, but God, it's a good-looking jumper.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think he's exactly the kind of person that the Portland fans, I think, would really embrace. Partly, you know, because of, well, a lot, I think, because of his father, Gary Trent Sr. You know, he was there. He had 1 year before Rasheed, Bonzi, all those guys came in, and then. Yeah, he was there for a couple of years with them, and then he moved on. He did have a little trouble while he was here. He did not come out of that era without some activities that put him on the radar.
Grant and Arvydas Sabonis, who did or who didn't?
Right, exactly. Well, and he seems to have really gotten his life going in a good direction after he was out of the NBA. I was reading a story. Mark Spears wrote an in-depth article on him maybe last year. As Gary Trent Jr. was coming into Duke, he wrote a pretty extensive article about Gary Trent Sr.'s life. And man, he have a difficult upbringing. Then he was in the NBA, had his NBA career, played a little bit in Europe, came back, and then he ended up for quite a while. He was he worked in a school as like a counselor, you know, helping, just like a success counselor. Mm-hmm. He wasn't like a school counselor, but he, you know, hung out with all the kids and helped them and listened and provided some, with like a middle school. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, Gary Trent Jr. also really stood out. He was named, Bleacher Report talked about him as one of the standouts at the Combine during those 5-on-5 workouts. So, you know, wonder how he did on his personality test.
Yeah, here's hoping he did well, because honestly, and I know I never say this about Duke players, especially 4-year Duke players. I think the one-and-dones can be a little bit different. But I just
he's a one-and-done, correct?
Yeah, and I just don't trust the 4-year Duke guys like the Grayson Allens of the world. And that's just he kind of epitomizes, I think, what Duke is, at least to me, mentally. And I'm just not a fan of those kind of guys that come out of there. They're great college players, but I don't think they ultimately find a lot of success in the NBA. The one other thing that I wanted to say about the list that Quick brought out, not that he doesn't have sources, obviously. This is according to Happy Walters, so pretty easy to believe it's true. The Blazers.
Explain who Happy Walters is.
He's a big time agent in the NBA. Been around forever.
Okay. Does he represent any current Blazers?
I don't think Happy currently does.
Okay.
You know what? We're gonna do the live lookup. You know what's really funny is when you check search Happy Williams, like the first 5 results are Pharrell Williams'
Happy song Happy.
Yep. But I don't think he actually has any that are active right now. the thing I was going to say, though, is I think that there's something to be taken away from this. Oh, Harkless. I should have known that. The whole negotiation with Harkless. I should have remembered that one. But the thing I was going to say about this whole list is the Blazers typically don't. They send out some mixed messages around draft time. I mean, we've talked about this before, that the Blazers under Neil Olshey, they operate under a veil of secrecy. They don't share anything as far as what their intentions are. If you leak something to the press as an opposing team working in a trade, you're likely to never see that trade be completed. They send up smoke screens for free agents, for trade deals, for draft workouts. I mean, Donovan Mitchell's workout in Utah, Lindsay said that, the story goes that the workout was so good he threatened to fire anybody who mentioned how good the workout was because they wanted to keep Donovan Mitchell under wraps. So there's always that kind of stuff going around. That's not just held to the NBA too. The same is true in the NFL as well.
Okay. So, but the list that you were saying, the list that Jason Quick tweeted out.
Yeah, no, I was just saying the list that he tweeted out. I mean, it's coming from Happy Walters. It's not coming from a Blazers source. So there's definitely some credibility to it. Okay.
And then there was a brief kerfuffle, which maybe has to do with what you were just talking about, over Chandler Hutchison, the player, I believe, from Boise State, who dropped out of the combine, and rumor was that he'd had assurances from a team in the in the 20s that he would have a place, and because of the connection to Damian Lillard's trainer, who is at Boise State, there was speculation that maybe that was the Blazers. And then Jason Quick came out and said, no, that was not the Blazers. Have you heard any other parts of this story?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard it kind of front to back of what's going on, but I think the thing for Blazers fans to keep an eye on, the Blazers fan are the Blazers fans. The Blazers organizations are the only ones I've seen that have actively denied this rumor. So take that for what it's worth.
Methinks you doth protest too much?
Yeah, so again, smoke screens. It could be sending up a lot of things, but Chandler is definitely one of those guys I think that is closer to what Portland needs. I think he's still a little undersized for that wing position hole that Portland's trying to fill, but they need to get bigger, and adding another 6'7" guy to the roster is not a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, there was one other person at the Combine, at least one other person from the Blazers, and that was Blazers general manager or president of basketball operations.
There you go, the Pro Bono.
Neil Olshey was there, and he was interviewed on ESPN. He had a lot to say, a lot of things to say that have Blazer fans eagerly firing up the trade machine. You want to maybe give a little synopsis of what you heard? I've got some specific questions about what he said, but what's your overarching theme that you took from his comments to ESPN?
Neil Olshey is the master salesman. He's incredibly good at his job as far as putting the company line out there, backing it up, standing by it. And this is the first time I've seen him in his tenure here contradict himself multiple times in like one press conference, let alone contradicting what he said 3 weeks ago at exit interviews.
Well, and I was kind of surprised because every once in a while he'd say something, and he'd say something like that I just started to figure out, like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, but shouldn't he be 2 years ahead of me in this? As that's the hope. As the person in charge.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got one quote that I want to read and have you explain what you think it means. Okay, so here we go. So we've been backfilling the roster with the Zach Collinses, the Caleb Swanigans, trying to find guys like Mo Harkless or Shabazz Napier here and there. And I think probably one of the things we were a little too conservative with this offseason and at the trade deadline was we were probably far too protective of our draft pick and our trade exceptions and the tools we had to continue to build the roster long term, and maybe lost sight of the fact that the first round was going to be more competitive than we expected.
Yeah. Wow.
What does that mean?
Wow.
So
if
let's
you're
start with being too conservative with the offseason and the trade deadline and too protective of our draft pick and our trade exception.
Teams that are rebuilding aren't conservative. So what is this? I thought this was a rebuilding team.
Well, I thought they were rebuilding on the fly, so they're not exactly rebuilding.
Right.
They're retooling around Dame's trajectory.
Oh, but you're talking about retooling around them with guys that are 5 and 6 and 7 years younger. So again, this is the contradiction where it comes up immediately. First, it was the playoffs are not the goal, and then it was maybe that we weren't ready
Maybe
for the playoffs.
we should start planning for the playoffs.
Yeah, but you said
that
the playoffs.
was the one where I was like, wait a minute.
Like which side of this fence do you want to be on, Neil? And that's what I mean. That's so unlike him. He's usually just chopping it up, just serving it up exactly as it needs to be served. And he was just stomping over everything that he said, and it was really, really weird.
So when he says too conservative with the offseason and at the trade deadline, do you think he might be saying that the Blazers held too tightly to those assets because they didn't have the right offer to discuss with any other team? Or do you think he means that they were holding on to it because they've really believed so much in the development as a team that he wanted to preserve those for the future, for that final piece?
Honestly, I don't think it's either one of them. I think it's packaging up and selling that they didn't have anything really to sell. I mean, outside of C.J. McCollum, Damian Lillard, and Zach Collins, what do you have on this roster today that's attractive?
Okay, so too conservative, meaning we didn't shop CJ.
Yeah,
like everybody. Okay,
that's the only way I can take that for that to be held true at all. That's the only way.
And when he says too protective of our draft pick, is he talking about this year's draft pick? Because this year's draft pick is like not a great draft pick.
No, let's say that they finished. Let's say that they did finish in the lottery, and they've got like a 0.8% chance of moving up. Like, is that still not worth it to move away from one of their big contracts? Because I think that's what if I'm trying to take Olshey here at what he's saying, and the only thing that you're being protective of that draft pick for is attaching it to a player to ship them out. That's the only thing that I can see here that makes any sense around the NBA. Because who else is calling this draft pick? Yeah,
right?
That's what I mean. So who else is calling the Blazers asking for a Blazers draft pick? Like, I mean, even at their absolute worst, let's talk like late December, early January, where things were just not going well, and they're projected as a lottery team. They're still in the high lottery, and by high I mean the 11 to 14 range, where the closest they've been over the last couple of years. Do they really value that highly that they weren't able to make a deal? Because remember, they started to get things going into the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. So the value of that had to have been going down ever so slightly. So why would you still continue to value that? And let's say the Blazers don't go on that 13-game winning streak. They win 7 or 8. They're still like right there in the thick of things. So I don't know, man. It's just really, really, really weird to hear him talk about timelines when like he's operating on 3 different timelines with different sets of rules for each one. And that's just like that's as bad, if not worse, than Joe Schmo out here on the trade machine. Mm-hmm. And that's just totally unlike him from what we've seen in the past, as far as like what he's willing to say publicly.
So, okay, this is the most reasonable explanation that I can get, because I understand that the Blazers right now are held back by some contracts.
They're not in a good spot.
No, nobody right. So I get that, but I also get that the team from the Bay Area has minimum 2-3 more years of dominance that our team is not even
you're not sniffing it.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, why make any drastic moves right now when, we're stuck? So, why cut off our nose to spite the face, right?
I can get behind that reasoning, but then at the same time, you can't package this as we're retooling or rebuilding, or we need playoff caliber players now. Because that's the next thing that he says, is that we need playoff caliber players now, which means you're not building for when the Warriors fall off. You're talking about being in the moment and competing in the playoffs right now. And that's part of that, contradiction in here that just kind of has me going, what?
Well, so again, trying to figure out a reasonable explanation for this. Okay, the Blazers aren't going to win the championship within the next few years with other teams in the spots that they are, and with challenges that they have to move forward and really, build into a championship type roster. But maybe he's looking around going, but you know what? We could have tried harder to get farther in the playoffs. He must not listen to the Blazers Edge podcast, because we've been talking the entire year about how tight the Northwest Conference is and how tight everybody knew how tight the race was going to be in the playoffs.
This as soon as the trades were done. When Paul George came, when Carmelo came, when Butler
we were like,
moved.
the Northwest Division is going to be brutal.
Yeah, I mean, you got Paul Millsap in Denver, and you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be just a complete nightmare. And people were calling me crazy when I said I think Utah could finish ahead of Portland. Like, this division is easily the best division in basketball, and it's not even close.
It was definitely the most competitive.
Yeah, and here's the thing that really just kind of blew my mind in here was that this quote on the offseason plan, and you were talking about the playoff caliber guys. I think with this offseason, we shift our focus to playoff caliber guys that hit the right benchmark.
You got to do it in the Neil Olshey voice, Dan.
No, I can't do it. That can really perform come April. Yeah, I know. I don't have the right staccato for it. But guys that hit the right benchmarks with a body of work that can really perform come April. So you're just taking shots at everybody on your team, basically.
So is he saying we're done worrying about – I read that as we're done worrying about Damian's trajectory, and we can get an old dude who can come in and shoot lights out.
Yeah, well, he's saying here's the next line. Knowing the rebuild got done quicker. So
we're done.
The rebuild is done, Tara.
Sweet.
So we're no longer a rebuilding team. We're not in insert year here of blank year rebuild. That changes. Year 2 of a 4-year rebuild, year 3 of a 5-year rebuild. It's weird how there's always been like a 2-year gap before the end of that, that next rebuild. It's gone from like a 3-year to a 5-year, or to a 4 and a 5-year rebuild every year. It's like weird. That end number counter keeps going up.
Fortunately, Zach Collins is going to be good for 12 to 15 years.
Oh, he better be, because it's our responsibility to move him back closer to the basket. We compared him a lot to like a Kevin McHale, LaMarcus Aldridge. I'm sorry, I can't let that go. No, you cannot compare Zach Collins to a Hall of Famer with the second best footwork in NBA history. That does not work.
Okay, but he's not lying in saying that he did, because he did. Neil Olshey, whether or not that was a comparison we're ready to all buy into, I'm getting the feeling that you're not ready to buy into that comparison. But, he's not lying about the fact that that's what he sold him as.
That's nuts to double down on it like that. And don't get me wrong, Zach could be a hell of a player. But, I mean, have we not learned from like the expectations that were set for Myers? Like that's just like, if you want to compare him to an athletic post player who can play inside and has a nice finish, find somebody else. But comparing Zach Collins to another white dude who just happens to be a Hall of Famer, holy shnikes, what are you doing? That's to me, that's just terrible. I cannot wrap my head around that comparison.
Okay, but what was he? So some of that I think is he was just caught up in the moment, and I don't think we can really parse that too carefully.
Even like
but what
a
I
young
want,
Rashid, So he named the two best power forwards in Blazers history and a Hall of Famer.
Okay, I don't want to. I know that you're upset about this comparison, but I don't want to belabor it because hasn't really been absorbed. Like, is everybody thinking that Zach Collins is going to, like, within the next couple of years, he's going to be?
Yes, and here's the problem. Here's the problem, because I'm going to transition into the Karl Anthony-Towns trade rumor stuff that we kind of popped up out of here. Because you when we talk offline, you tell me nobody actually believes that stuff. Nobody actually believes that stuff. There are comments in, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but there are comments on Blazers Edge where people are calling Zach Collins for Karl Anthony-Towns a lateral move.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Tara.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that at this point.
But there are people who believe that because Collins, I'm using air quotes here, plays defense, he's more valuable than Karl Anthony-Towns. Karl Anthony-Towns is what you hope to God someday Zach Collins can be. I get that Collins puts up probably better defensive box plus minus, and he is more engaged on that end. But that's literally all he has to do. There are very, very few players in the entire NBA who are two-way players who give it all on each end of the floor on damn near every possession. Remind me, when was the last time Zach Collins was responsible for creating 25 points a night?
I don't know, Dan.
It's not a thing. Or responsible for being the leading rebounder night in and night out. Or being one of the league leaders in double-doubles night in and night out. Like, that's not, like, the idea, and this is why I think, like, these kind of comparisons are so, I don't want to say toxic, but they're just crappy. Like, you can't make those kind of things out there.
Would it be fair to say that you believe that they are dangerous in terms of they put too high expectations on a player to have to turn out like somebody else when we haven't even seen what he can do yet?
We haven't even seen him as a starter yet, let alone a starting contributor.
Mm-hmm.
And people
I want to go back before we move on to the cat thing, though. I want to talk about, like, so if they move him back under the basket, is Olshey saying that? I mean, is the situation that he's talking about if Nurkic walks and they need a center, then Zach Collins is going to be the new center? Is that what? What they're preparing us for?
That's the only thing I can assume, unless they want to play Ed Davis out on the perimeter or go small. I know. I
love Ed Davis so much.
I love Ed
too. He's taken like 4 shots outside of the paint, like his entire
I know.
career.
I love Ed, but that's like if you're intent on bringing back Ed, like, it's either that or you're starting Zach Collins at center.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
Like, if you look at the lineup right now, unless the things change, the heaviest guy you're going to have on the court is Aminu. I mean, seriously.
Right. Well, I mean, I think we talked about Ed, like, you know, at least at the beginning of the year, if Nurkic is gone and the Blazers don't bring in another center, then Ed would start at least for the beginning of the year, and Zach Collins would come in as the center.
Which wouldn't be a bad scenario. Like, Zach is a off the bench center, that's fine. But I mean, let's just put this in perspective. Could you imagine Boogie Cousins comes back and is healthy and sees Zach Collins as his matchup?
Mm-hmm. And he gets like that big Grinch smile on his face.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not shaded Zach. I mean, just Boogie's got him by like 70 pounds.
He's a lot bigger than he is.
That's a big dude, and again, you don't have to face too many of those guys night in and night out, but guys like Cousins and Embiid, I mean, they would just eat him alive down there.
Yeah, I mean, to Zach's credit, he has shown that he mentally
he's there. He wants to compete. He wants to compete.
That's good.
Yeah, that stuff's all great, fine, and dandy.
That's good.
But again, this kind of goes back to the whole mixed messages thing. Like, Zach's not ready. By the way, he's LaMarcus Aldridge, Kevin McHale, and Rasheed Wallace, and we're going to play him as a back-to-the-basket player. What?
I don't know why he didn't just throw in Shaq. I mean, come on. Like, if you're going to reach
Larry
for the
Bird,
stars, reach for the stars.
Just throw like every every Blazers great big man, and then every white Hall of Famer that's remotely tall. I mean, a little bit of Larry Bird in there too. Some Pistol Pete Maravich. I mean, it was just like, Neil, what are you doing?
Right.
That's what I mean. Like, every statement that he made was just a contradiction to either something he had just said previously or something he said 3 or 4 weeks ago at the exit interviews.
Yeah.
And my head was spinning by the time it was done. Like, what did I just watch?
Mm-hmm. I was very, very confused. I don't think it's super fair to like parse every single word because, you know, when someone's got a microphone in your face and you're talking, not everything, you know, I will admit I personally don't make sense all the time. I don't know if you would ever admit that, but I will admit that.
It's his job, though. That is literally his job, is to have his measured takes.
Yeah. Well, I do. There were some really interesting nuggets out of there where I feel like we've come to a point where he has said that we are I think he's basically represented us, the team, as no longer building just around Damian Lillard's trajectory, which I think is kind of exciting when we, you know, move into the off season, if that's really going to be the case, because it's going to broaden, you know, the ability for us to talk about even more people.
Yeah, to be honest, this is the time of year for rumors, and God knows we're killing for them. As far as big rumors go, doesn't get a whole lot bigger than Minnesota and Karl Anthony-Towns, like we alluded to earlier. I just kind of throwing this out there. I've heard plenty of things going on in Minnesota as far as relationships between their star players, and this isn't exactly surprising. But as much as I want to believe this is true and Portland could get involved, I would imagine that Tibbs would be gone long before Karl Anthony-Towns. But I've seen weirder stuff in the NBA.
Right. And to be clear, this rumor is very unsubstantiated. It was actually one line in the Zach Lowe podcast between him and Brian Windhorst, basically. But it was It was a kind of a fun thought experiment. And so Dave put it into a Blazers Edge article just to see what kind of thoughts Blazers Edge readers had about it. Now, talk about the thing that Dave threw out there. What did he propose?
Okay, so it's basically C.J. Collins and a first for Karl Anthony-Towns, which in theory works, quote unquote, but salary cap wise it doesn't. Portland would have to end up taking back somebody like Gorgie Jang to make this work.
Right, because Towns makes like something ridiculously low, like less than $7 million, I believe.
Yeah, he's on his rookie scale contract still. So
yeah,
I think his last year, I think it's $7.8 million is what it goes up to. If I'm Portland, I do this in a heartbeat without blinking. Like if Minnesota does this, you go to CJ's house and pack his bags for him.
And you say, it was wonderful, CJ.
CJ, we love you. We're going to go ahead and get this guy.
Great.
Yep. We're going to get this guy who is a positional nightmare matchup. Can work off Dame endlessly. We've seen what versatile bigs can do with Damian Lillard in the pick and roll. So this is a no-brainer for Portland.
And I would guess it goes without saying that Nurkic either accepts the minimum qualifying offer or somebody else picks him up.
Yeah, I think that would be exactly what has to happen. But Portland gets a year-ish of a little bit of relief. You're bringing in Jang, so you probably let Ed walk. That part of it sucks.
No, wait a minute.
Yep.
We got to make this. We got to be able to keep Ed here.
I mean, positionally, how many bigs are you going to have then? I mean, I guess you could say he replaces Collins.
The team from the Bay Area has 6.
Yeah, theirs are a little bit different than ours. I guess you could say he replaces Collins, but I don't.
Yeah.
If you're intent on bringing Nurkic back, how much money do you have tied up?
Would they want to take back a center? Could we throw a center?
Well, I mean, they've got Collins in there.
Money? Oh, right. Okay, CJ and Collins. Yep. Okay.
So, but I mean, you look at the Blazers front court. There's no shortage of bodies there. So, how much money does Portland really want to tie up at that position?
or those positions, I should say.
And so they would have Karl Anthony-Towns for 1 year before they had to renegotiate his contract, and it would probably be a doozy. But then they wouldn't have CJ anymore. They would only have Damian. So, potentially it could work for
the max deal's there
long-term.
for him. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, at least in my mind, it's easier to justify spending a max deal on Cat than it is on CJ. And granted that they're not quite the same as far as dollars wise, but positionally, flexibility, fit, having that matchup nightmare that we always talk about, I think that's a real thing. So it's a strange situation for sure.
Right. Well, but that's probably on a scale of 0 to 10
Negative
possibility
2.
of happening. Yeah. I was going to say 0.01, because it's not like strictly impossible, but like as unlikely as you could possibly get without being impossible.
KG said anything is possible, but I think he meant anything is possible except for this potential trade.
Sure thing. But another one that was brought up by Grant Hughes from Bleacher Report was Brook Lopez. And I found this one intriguing. You want to talk about what this trade proposal was? It would.
Well, that's right. It's a free agent signing. One realistic free agency signing for every playoff eliminated team. The idea that Brook Lopez could come here and fit in this role it seemed like a far-fetched to me. Like if Brook Lopez wants to come here, not play, not really be in the hunt for a championship, and not make that much money, he can come to Portland. But
we know that the Lopez family has an affinity for the Northwest.
Robin does for sure. We could see if Brook does as well. Yeah, I mean,
the boys, they spent time here.
Yeah,
when they were little.
It's just. I don't know if that's the kind of money that Brook's going to get, or if that's what he's seeking long term. Does he want to be, a rotation or bench guy for a contending team? I mean, I get where he was going with this idea. I just think it's again far fetched. It's not quite as outlandish as Cat to Portland, but does Portland really need to add another big body who's not really mobile?
Mm-hmm. You know what I have been thinking about with the upcoming free agency is what will the Blazers do if another team produces an offer sheet for one of the restricted free agents? Can you remember the last time the Blazers did not match an offer sheet? It feels like something that's just what they do.
Yeah, no, I can't think of one.
Yeah.
They put out more offer sheets than I think that they've had matched.
Yeah. I just worry that, I worry about like what happened with Crab. I have no idea about what happened with Crab, but I imagined in my mind the Blazers had a number that they had in their mind that they would offer Crab. And then he got an offer sheet that was larger than that, but not so much larger than that they couldn't talk themselves into it.
It should have been the fear of God that compelled them to not sign that.
So I'm hoping that they are, this year going into it, that they have a plan where they have a certain okay, this is what we said that we would match, and if they go a penny over it, we won't do it.
I think they'll get tighter with it this year. I don't think they have a choice.
They will have to be. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
They're just in a position where every dollar counts. I mean, I think they were $700 away from the luxury tax this year.
Yeah. Oh, so gosh, really? Is that how close it ended up?
Yeah. So I mean, it was. I mean, they're counting every dollar. So
stay in school, kids, and take your math class. Because that paid off for somebody.
Yeah, math pays. Trust me. Tom Penn's cashing a check from ESPN off of what he did here in Portland.
Wow. Yeah, it could have cost him a lot of money. Well, I mean, in my opinion, like we just talked about two centers, and hard to imagine bringing on another center when there's such a gap in that. Somebody who
the wing
can come
position,
in no matter what and hit buckets.
So far, we've talked about bigs and more combo guards.
Yeah.
We're still not addressing that wing position need that just hasn't been touched.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about we've got weeks and weeks and weeks to discuss all of the rumors that come across our desks. So we'll save any more talk of that for the future, unless you have any others that you want to throw out there right now.
Nope. I'm waiting to melt down at least until draft day.
It's still such a long ways away. It's still over a month away.
Just a little gracious. Just a little over a month. We're good.
All right. Well, there was one other another piece of news that is related to the NBA. It's not directly NBA news, but earlier this week on Monday, the Supreme Court struck down a federal law that prohibited sports gaming. So what that means is that states can now legalize sports betting. So to put that into context, Nevada right now is the only state that has it. In Nevada alone, in 2017, $4.8 billion was wagered.
That's a lot of cheddar.
The total amount wagered in Nevada. It looks like more than a dozen states have already introduced sports betting legislation, I guess, kind of in anticipation of this happening.
They had this stuff ready to go.
Right. And so conservative estimates are that by the end of the year, 8 or 9 states, by the end of this year, by the end of 2018,
that paperwork was ready to go.
We'll have licensed sports books allowing legal gambling, and a total of 12 to 14 states may have this all in place before the end of 2019. So that is big news. But what does that look like? How does that change? How does that affect the NBA and the game that we know?
There's a couple things to take out of this. First of all, Adam Silver has kind of been at the forefront of this for the leagues around the U.S.
Because it's a band of league, like most of the leagues, like NFL,
everybody, MLB, NBA, NHL, they're all kind of sitting in the same boat. However, Adam Silver has basically said, no, we want in, we want our 1% guaranteed take, and then whatever else comes out of it, we'll take part, and that's basketball related income that goes to the owners and the players.
Okay. So, yeah, my question was how does that affect us as fans and people who watch the game? So it means an increase in basketball-related income, which means an eventual increase to the salary cap?
Yep, I've seen estimates anywhere between a $5 and $7 million increase in the next couple of years. The other thing is actually the watching experience. If the NBA is going to be a part of this, I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden you saw franchises around the league in their mid-game show start talking about gambling. Here's the odds. Here's where the lines changed. Here's your bet of the game. This bet brought to you by Bellagio. Or whatever your state-run casino is. And Oregon's not exactly new to this either. Less than 20 years ago, they had it. So I would expect Oregon to take part of it probably faster than almost anybody.
That was the Pick'em games as part of the Oregon lottery?
Yeah.
You're saying is what they had?
Yeah. They had legalized sports gambling here in the state. In the state, was it 18 years ago? So it wasn't that long ago.
Okay. So the other things that I've seen mentioned, and by the way, ESPN has really good coverage of this, like explaining all the different aspects of it. That's where I got all my information.
They want to be the worldwide leader in sports and gambling.
Sports and entertainment and gambling.
Yep. Because
ESPNG.
Yeah, there's a ton of money to be made here. The reality of it is it's a brand new market. People talk about you can make your backroom bets with your friends. But now if it's there and readily available, there's going to be a spike. How many people have been like, man, I wish I could put some money on a game. I'm not going to Vegas to do that. Now that backroom money and plus the added exposure, now the people that, would gamble or thought about it, now they're really going to take a hard look at it.
And, some people have talked about this being a way to to protect the game. Like everybody says, like, protecting the sanctity of the game is the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
So how
yada,
does
yada, yada.
legalizing this? How does legalizing it, protect the sanctity of it? Is it just because it's like, it'll be more regulated, and so
it's out in the open. I mean, if it was so well protected, how did we get Tim Donaghy in the first place?
Right. Well, I mean, that's what they're saying is if they legalize it, that's to potentially avoid situations like that. I mean,
that's how they caught the guys at Arizona State years ago. Is that, all of a sudden a game is being bet up big time on like a Tuesday between Arizona State and Washington State. Mm-hmm. It was obvious something's going on. So if it becomes more public and more lights are shined on it, I think it's harder to, hide it. I mean, I'm not necessarily a proponent of gambling, but I'm not against it either. I mean, I've talked about it before. When the Blazers were projected at 27.5 wins, I just happened to be in Vegas. And I laid a fat amount of money down and made more money than I ever thought I would make gambling. So I could see how easy it would be for the NBA to make a ton of money off this going forward, and they're going to want to protect that golden goose as much as possible.
I think it's interesting, some of the things that I've read about how, and you brought it up, how coverage of games might change because of the interest in the gambling aspect of it, as opposed to,
they're like
whatever,
microtransactions.
Whatever else people are talking about.
In-game purchases.
Yeah. Well, and then regulating the whole, the whole app world, because right now they're still talking about like brick and mortar places. Like you still have to go somewhere to place a bet, but they're trying to get it, they're trying to work it in so that people can like have apps and make those bets. How does this affect the whole, like the daily fantasy, will it crush that because people will want to go do other kinds of betting?
Nah.
Do you think it'll enhance it? Do you think it's anything that they're concerned about?
I think it kind of goes hand in hand. People that want to participate in those are still going to participate in those because there's the feeling that comes along with that, the draft process, as opposed to just betting straight lines. And I think it's easier to click on players than it is to, in draft, as we've seen with fantasy football especially, than it is to just throw money down on a straight bet.
A game.
Yeah. I think there's the game within the game that the daily fantasy presents, as opposed to laying money down on a particular outcome, like the association that comes with those two things.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be interesting. And I can't, as I think about how this might change the landscape, I can't help but think of what happened in, Oregon with the legalization of cannabis and everybody going out and growing so much cannabis that everybody wanted to get in on that, and they grew so much now that there's like this huge oversupply of it.
In Oregon, no way.
I wonder if that something like that might play out. Like, what are some of the unintended ramifications of this? I think it'll be an interesting thing to keep our eyes on and watch and see what comes of it.
Yeah, I don't think that'll necessarily be as much of a problem, because I think they're probably going to limit the amount of gambling licenses that go out, and that's how they kind of control that.
I thought that's what they were supposed to do with their growing licenses. But,
yeah, how easy is it to grow a marijuana plant versus how easy is it to set up an actual casino, because of all the rules and regulations and laws and money necessary to make that.
A lot more expensive to lay it out.
Exactly. Yeah. The barriers to entry, I think, are much, much higher, as opposed to, keeping the seeds from your latest procurement.
Yeah. Well, the world is changing, but you know what's not changing, Dan? Love. And royal weddings happening.
God,
and
are we back to this again?
Princesses falling in love.
You're going to make me bash this broken mic against my forehead.
Choirs singing and all kinds of wonderful things happening this summer. It might be slow for the Blazers, but there's a lot going on in the world.
But there's love in the air. And that's all that matters. Oh, God.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up. So I can go back to watching highlights of the royal wedding, and you can go back to your dark corner and
damn
do
right.
whatever.
Hide from the sun. Let's add it some more.
Yeah. So let's see. Remind everybody, you can find us on the Blazers Edge podcast feed on the Almighty Baller Network. I can be found on Twitter at TCBBiggs. Even though there's no Blazers going on, I'm still keeping up watching the NBA Finals. I'm also watching the WNBA, which has been fun. It just started this weekend. Lots of games. I'm really enjoying that. By the way, WNBA League Pass is $17 total.
Yeah, I wish regular NBA League Pass was $17. That would be much nicer.
$17. So everybody should just go out and buy it, just like to support the league, and just so that we can like have the numbers. Because that just like I was like $17 a month. No, $17, and the whole first week is free. So. Anyway, I've been watching that, so follow me on Twitter to find out what I'm watching and what I'm thinking about. And Dan, why don't you take us out of here and tell us what you're up to?
All right. So you can find me on Twitter at Danny Marang, as always, on Instagram, same handle. Blazers Outsiders continues through the summer. We'll start ramping up the draft coverage on NBC Sports Northwest with that. This week I will be sitting in with Chad Doing on Rip City Radio 620. So that's something to look forward to. Yeah, you can literally find me.
What time is that
everywhere.
show on?
So at Rip City Drive with Travis and Chad, I'm sitting in for Travis, and he'll be on in the drive time hour from 3 to 6. Not exactly certain what my schedule is going to look like for the week, but I will be in and around. So that's something to look out for. Other than that, I think we're just going to kind of keep grinding through the summer. And I'll go ahead and wrap it up here for Bowen-Biggs. I'm Danny Marang. Take care, everyone. Bye.